And the big crunch will be between the Scottish National Party and the Labour Party over who is best placed to, depending on your perspective, shield Scots from cuts or prevent Conservative reforms. And that actually that's the most immediate editorial effect for us, is that someone's going to try and own that space online, and we're going to try very hard to make sure that we have control of that discussion. Well, not control, we are the place for that discussion. From a commercial point of view, the most pressing question, I think, within Scottish journalism is over the independently funded news consortia. This is where people can bid for the right to provide regional news to the regional TV stations. Now in Scotland, Scottish Television's group missed out to a consortium of Johnson Press and DC Thomson. Has anyone here ever worked for Johnson Press? By show of hands. Right, then you can imagine their kind of approach. And personally, I'm quite heartened by the Conservatives' commitment to cut the IFNC scheme, because it means that my competitors won't get a big bucket of public money. STV, though, having lost out on that £7 million worth of funding, has just announced they're recruiting 10 local journalists in Scotland. Now that means they're the only company in Scotland that's employing new journalists. So whether or not that IFNC gets scrapped or not, there's going to be, at the level of local journalism in Scotland, there's going to be an awful lot of competition and bloodletting. Hooray.
The IFNC is scrapped effectively, as I understand it. It didn't get it in the tussle in the wash-up. It didn't get through as an element of the DE bill, and we won't see that happen. Is that right, Sean?
Well, the bill didn't deal with the pilots, so that's a pilot scheme for which contracts hadn't been signed, but there were kind of terms of heads of agreement agreed before the election. The Tories have always said, and it's quite clear now, that the full national rollout is not going to happen. Whether the pilot schemes, which is 7 million of funding over 2 to 3 years in Scotland, Wales and one English region, whether they go ahead is not yet clear to me, but we've heard noises both ways.
Yeah. Matt, it occurs to me that political bloggers were probably hoping for a return to the Tory style, a 1980s style Tory government, and it'd be a great time to be an opposition political blogger, and it's kind of turned out a bit drab, really, isn't it? It's hard to oppose anything that's there yet.
Oh, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting because everything has changed. And so everybody has got to reconsider what their aims are and whether they want to go on writing or whether they want to start looking at completely different areas. I think the first thing that I'd say is that I'd actually pay tribute to Sean and Tom Watson for the work they've done in open data. That's been vital. And I know that one of the commitments in the coalition document is to working with local media to build up local consortia. Quite what that's going to turn out looking like, I don't know. For me, the big trends that are happening are that the Westminster bubble, of the Westminster political bubble, and the London media bubble, that I hope they're going to break down. And that we've already seen that independent publishers can break stories and can get interviews with politicians and so on. This time we have 232 new MPs in Parliament. Was that me? I'm just sitting here. And I hope that those new MPs and the so-called new politics is actually going to mean a more intense engagement in the local areas and getting away from sort of the centres of London, Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, and so that there'll be more of an opportunity for local publishers. And I think that's all I'll say at the opening. But
okay. Any points from the floor? Any questions? Any journalists feel like this is a brave new world, that you're all excited about the changes that this coalition is going to clearer libel laws, freedom of information extension?
I'm excited about that.
Okay, let's hear from you, Chris.
I mean, I think... Sorry. I think there are all sorts of reasons why it's happening. Political, narrow interests. I mean, one of the corollaries would be if you start to, open schools for being taken over by local people, or, things like that, or make it so that things like the Audit Commission are essentially written out of existence, and you've got much more open data can be the analysis, the oversight can be done by the people, which actually I think is a good thing. It also potentially allows those with education, those with the ability to do it, to argue over where the money is going in the local bodies and so on. So you can see why it also satisfies some of the right-wing, or not right-wing, but the conservative think tanks, if you like, from the ideological point of view. That doesn't mean it's wrong, it just means that I can understand why they're doing it. It also satisfies some of the ideas about building stronger communities, which is why Labour are doing some of that stuff as well, and Liberals. So, I mean, it's a broad church, but it doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. And I think all this move towards open data, towards opening contracts. I mean, the opening contracts is such a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer for the bodies themselves, in that everybody knows that there are big outsourcing companies that are charging that much for the same service for one body and that much for another body, and they're just going to have to we know what they're going to do. And I've actually spoken to people who work for those companies and said, well, what we'll do is before we have to publish data, before that stuff's published, we'll go in and offer to renew the contract at a much lower amount, which is just instantly going to save money. And so you can be cynical about some of the reasons for doing this, but that doesn't mean that that's not a good thing. I mean, there are going to be challenges to journalists, there are going to be challenges to the community in terms of making sure that they use and look at the data, that they have an oversight in terms of doing this. But I still think it's a good thing. I think, Labour, I've got a lot of criticisms of Labour. I hated the Digital Economy Act. There were all sorts of things I had an issue with. But I congratulate, probably their most significant legacy was in the last 12 months, opening that stuff up, tackling the nettles of the Ordnance Survey, and they should be congratulated for that. And I've got issues with Conservatives, but Liberals, but nevertheless, they should be congratulated for this.
Stuart, I'm quite interested to know, there seems to me you've got some really interesting stuff about data, but it actually seems to be driven by digital SMEs creating interesting stuff. There seems sometimes to be one step removed from anything to do with journalism. I mean, does data journalism mean anything to you? Is it more bodies on the streets you actually need to
Data in itself, it's a useful journalistic tool. It's never a story, so someone has to take it, interpret it, put it into context. However, through FOIs in Scotland, we've had some great stories. It's the nature of the Scottish Parliament, our expenses scandals